Hello there, this is Aaron Osborne, the host of the Oblivious Maximus podcast. On my podcast, I chat to people about music and specifically records they really like. Andy was kind enough recently to come on and have a chat, and I've previously had guests from bands like Psychroptic, Cosmic Psychos, Violent Soho, Nails, and people from all walks of life who love talking about music. Head to obliviousmaximus.net for more info or search for Oblivious Maximus podcast wherever you get your podcasts or on social media. Brutal!
Hello friends, welcome to the podcast, and before we kick into this week's episode, come on over and join me on Patreon. That's right, patreon.com/Andy Dowling is the place to go if you want to join the Cool Kids Club. Support starts from only $1 a month, and it goes directly back into this podcast, keeps it growing, keeps the whole train a-rolling. There are additional tiers that you can support the podcast and get access to exclusive content as well, such as bonus podcast episodes. Much more to come. Go over there, patreon.com/Andy Dowling. Thank you very much. Now let's kick into it. Here we go, folks. Episode 230 of the Andy Social Podcast is here. 230. Incredible. I can't believe how many episodes deep we are into this podcast thingo. Almost at 5 years, just blown away. And here we are, another week, another podcast, another great conversation to share with you all. Speaking of a return guest, Curtis Dewar of Dewar PR and one of the co-hosts of the Dumb and Dumbest podcast with Matt Bacon and Keefe from Ghost Cult magazine. Curtis is just a wealth of knowledge, and anybody really, if you're a musician or somebody in the DIY space in general, the do-it-yourself or the decide-it-yourself space, Curtis is just one of those guys you need to be following online and definitely be listening to these chats that I've had with Curtis. So if you haven't already, go back to episode 225 of the podcast where we previously got caught up and had a chat. And if you have listened to that already, you'll recall at the end of our chat that we committed to doing another podcast. And here we are. So here's a round two, so to speak. We cover heaps and heaps of different things, a lot more music talk, a bunch of different tangents, and just a fantastic guy to talk to. And I really want to bring more and more people back onto the podcast as regular guests. And I think no doubt Curtis will definitely be back on in the future. So if you want to follow Curtis, you can do so on Facebook and Instagram and Twitter. I'll dump all the links in the show notes, but if you search for Dewar PR, DEWARPR, then you'll be able to find him. Also go to his website, which is dewarpr.wordpress.com. But as you know, everything's in the show notes over at andydowling.net or andysocial.net. But enough waffling on from me. Please enjoy this great chat with Curtis Dewar. We made it happen. We locked in a time and we committed to it, and here we are. We're in a round two. So thanks for having another little chat with me.
No problem.
I wanted to. I had a bunch of notes from last time we caught up, and I thought I might just tick a couple of those things off the list, and then I've got a couple of other things that we could talk about, but we'll just see which way it goes. But you mentioned when we last spoke about doing what you're doing now from a PR perspective only for the last, I think you mentioned about four or 5 years or so. What were you doing beforehand? Was there anything music related that sort of led up to that point? And was there a decision behind you deciding to go down a PR path?
Well, you'll be kind of surprised about the answer to that. So basically, prior to that, I was actually working for a hockey team for a very brief time. My dad owned a hockey team, and I was actually helping him with some stuff, like some administrative stuff, sales type things. And then I had absolutely no background in anything to do with music whatsoever. And it just kind of happened because I'd been writing for some music blogs. Again, no experience in music other than listening to it growing up. And, I just started connecting with people, and basically, I think the sales background was the thing that got me in PR, to be honest.
Just is it more of an interest of seeing what your input could lead to as far as getting results?
Yeah, I think so, because it's kind of like, I don't know what it is, but I mean, even though I have absolutely no musical training, I really don't know anything about it other than, like I'm a fan. That's it. You know what I mean? I couldn't tell you. I couldn't tell you anything about anything musically. If you asked me a music term, I would just go blank. I have no idea.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So,
Yeah.
I mean, a lot of times people are talking over my head. They're talking about, the production and the engineering and stuff. I'm like, I don't fucking know. It just sounds good to me, or it sounds like shit, right?
Yeah.
So, but somehow I'm able to, I don't know, I'm just able to build the connections. I'm able to build the relationships with people, so that way I can get people's music heard by other people that know about that somehow. And I'm not really sure how, other than the fact that I think it's due to having a background in sales and marketing.
It probably gives you an advantage to not know a lot of the tech side of it all, because, as you said, it either sounds good or it sounds shit. And
Exactly.
And when it gets to a very sort of black and white approach with it, then you're not sort of getting stuck in the weeds of, the sort of the technicalities of it all, because you started to really size up these finer details, when ultimately, I mean, what you're pitching it to is the end listener. And most of us out there that just enjoy music, we just enjoy music, and we're not trying to gauge what the reasons are. It's either you turn it on, you like it, or you turn it off. So it's probably a little bit of an advantage to sort of come from that angle.
Well, yeah, I would imagine so too. But I mean, a lot of the times too, it's like, here's the thing is, like, I started getting using another person to write most of my press kits and stuff like that, because I'm not familiar enough with the music to adequately sometimes describe it as well as he can do it. So he has a background in music. He's very good. He's basically a music nerd. So he can basically put into words a better description than I possibly could, even though my descriptions are sufficient enough, that I can get someone to read my press release, right? So that's what I did in order to handle that thing right there. Was I just got someone who knew something about music. I get them to do my press kits for me. I pay them every month to do it, and then I take it. I listen to the music myself. I go, okay, I think you're gonna like this because you're a fan of this band, or this band, or just the fact, just say, hey, can you check out this band? Like I said, I have the ability to do it where other people just can't.
Well, I guess, I mean, this is probably coming from some of those books that you've read over the years about surrounding yourself with people with talent, leaning on strengths and identifying where your weak points are. So for you to be able to have somebody who's a little bit more sort of in depth from a music point of view, and being able to put that copy together, that addresses an area where you might not have as much background or confidence in, to be able to put it together to the standard that you want. So as you said, like you've got this sort of sales aspect to yourself that you've got a strength in. So it's like, okay, well, what are the other pieces? So just surrounding yourself with people that can help you get the outcomes you want.
Yeah, well, basically, because I mean, I know what I'm good at and I know what I'm not good at. I know that I'm good at, contacting people. I don't really have much back off on doing that, whether by email. And I'm also pretty good at establishing who I think a band would fit with, who I think would like certain bands. Like, if for example, a band comes to me and they're like, we want to get placement at Metal Injection. If I think that they're good enough to get in Metal Injection, I generally know which writer to pitch, right? Same thing like if it was a Decibel, or if it was somewhere, or one of those other major places, like if they want a specific stream, or I usually know who the right person is to ask for that band. I don't always, but I'm pretty good. That's what I'm pretty good at, is establishing who to best present a band to, or how to get them in front of someone. Does that make sense?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, the last thing you want is to be putting all that energy into putting a pitch together for somebody who ultimately is not going to connect or understand or get the full context or appreciation for what you're trying to sell ultimately, what you're trying to sell them an idea.
Well, here's the funny thing too, is that basically my whole pitch will be like, okay, this is a doom metal band. You know what I mean? They're kind of like, they sound like blah band, or, it's a doom metal band. Because my lack of musical training, I can't really get into the ins and outs of it too much, right? But I can be like, okay, this song was really good, blah, 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 blah. Or I can say, they kind of sound like blah, blah type of band. But I think that does help, because what I've seen, like other people, publicists and PR people that are do have a musical background is they'll start going into the playing and all the rest of that type of stuff and the composition structure, blah, 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 blah. And it's kind of like, who cares? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But I mean, like, because musicians like care about this type of stuff, right? But I mean, like you said, the end product, the user doesn't usually care that much about it unless they're listening to it to learn from it. You know what I mean? At least that's been my experience. I could be totally mistaken in this, but it works for me.
Oh, I think it's 100% correct, especially for the majority of when you're talking about heavy music in general. I think the majority of listeners and fans of heavy music will ultimately be very sort of black and white with what they like, and they'll nerd out and they'll get into detail, but it's usually a secondary thing after actually finding the initial appeal of the song itself. But I guess the only other audience I could think of off the top of my head that would really appreciate a lot of that technicality up front would be that whole space around solo guitarists, instrumentalists and things like that, where you've got a big nerd culture that's associated with it, where these guys are bedroom musicians. They've probably got their own YouTube channels. They're part instructional sort of personalities as well, and so that kind of level of technicality would probably be really appreciated in an upfront press release or a pitch or something like that. But I think that's definitely an exception rather than the rule. So I think that's, as I said before, I think it's just an advantage to be able to come in without wading too deep too quickly, because I think then once the door's opened and someone's got their attention, then you can start to allow people to dig in deeper where they feel it's necessary.
I agree. Now, one other thing I want to point out too is when I do get those kind of bands, like the nerdy type bands, like I said, I have someone that's writing press kits for me, so he can get into that. And I also generally, as a general rule, know what outlets are going to cover those types of bands as well, right? Like I know, for example, like Toilet of Hell, they're totally into technical death metal. You know what I mean? So if I got something like that, I go, oh, Toilet of Hell. You know what I mean? Or else, there's writers at Metal Injection, same thing with writers at Decibel. There's writers at all these different places, they're into that style. So if I go, oh, tech death or tech prog music or whatever, it's kind of like, oh, I got a general idea of who's going to like that anyways. And I can go, hey, I got this prog band or whatever, you want to check them out. So it's still doable for me to be able to do that even without even that type of knowledge. And sometimes it's even easier because I can just kind of go like, oh, well, it's, nerd music. I know all these people that like, I'm saying nerd music, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
No offense to anybody. But you know what I mean? It's kind of like, I do know the people that are going to be into that. And it's like the guys that are always talking about, like music theory and stuff like that. So I'm just like, okay, pitch it over to those guys. And generally, they will be prone to listen to it if I know that, right? Because I know to say like, it's a prog album, you like the style of music, blah, 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 blah type of a thing.
Do you, it might be a mix of both, but do you generally try to keep relationships up with individual writers over time, or are you still sort of going through a main point of contact that you've got a strong relationship with, say, not so much just to focus on Metal Injection, but any of these larger sort of publications out there? Are you more fixated on having the main sort of point of contact there and building that relationship, or do you sort of maintain a lot of individual relationships with writers who may end up changing publications over time?
I try to do just individual ones, and I usually don't. I really don't go and try to get relationships with people specifically because they're at a certain outlet. I don't think I ever have. I'll be honest with you. One of the best ways that actually got me connected with writers, and something that still gets me connected with writers this very day, is just using Twitter. Half the time I don't even have just as a totally honest thing. A lot of times you don't even have to send a pitch about the album itself to a writer if you're engaging with them constantly on social media. You send the press kit out, you can see that they sent it. Sometimes you'll go like, hey, did you listen to that? And they'll say, yeah, I'm planning on writing something up about it or something. But part of the whole process that a lot of people haven't quite figured out yet is a lot of times if you just stay connected with people on social media, that goes a long way to getting your stuff covered.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Yeah. It almost acts as like a total follow-up even if you're not being direct about it, if that makes sense. Like, I don't go into a lot of people with a heavy pitch. Usually, a lot of times I'll do follow-up email like every PR does, but a lot of my follow-up consists of, making sure I'm talking to people on Twitter or on Facebook or on whatever, just to make sure that they're checking my shit out. You know what I mean? Because if I'm at the top of someone's mind because I'm sending them an email to their inbox, plus they're getting the press kit, plus they see me on social media, they're going to be more likely to check out one of my bands.
And it's just too easy for people to be distracted and
Exactly.
sort of drowning in noise of people that are probably trying to sell them an idea or pitch them an idea. Totally. So it's just way too easy to miss out on things or forget things or just have every intention to do something but just never get around to doing it. Well,
here's one other thing, Andy, just to, sorry to interrupt, but before I forget, is the other thing too is just having the podcast as a tool as well, because we interview a lot of writers and we interview a lot of media professionals on that podcast. So just having talked to those people, like doing a one-on-one with them, that opens like a whole amount of doors. Like, a lot of times I don't even have to follow up with those people now, because when they get my email, they're going to open it.
Yep.
You know what I mean? Like,
they have a connection with you, don't they? I mean, they've formed a connection.
That's the thing. Yeah, and it's not even intended a lot of the times. It's just like, so a lot of these people that we've invited on have been Matt's idea or Keefe's idea. Like, we had on the other day, for example, we had on John Freeman of Freeman Promotions, who's technically a competitor to me, right? But, I mean, at the same time, now we have a connection because we got along just great on the podcast. So, I mean, if something happens in the future, I have him as an ally now if I need him, right? Like, he might, like, I haven't tested it yet, but I would assume that if I ever had a question or wanted some help with getting a contact, I bet you I could probably just say to him, hey, would you be willing to help me out? And he'd probably be more likely to now, even though he's a competitor. That's just one example, and maybe I'm mistaken on that, but same thing when we interview, when we first started interviewing Greg Kennedy from Metal Injection. I didn't have that great of a relationship with Greg at that point. I pitched him, but we didn't really know each other. But now when I contact him, he answers like 90% of the time, where before it was 5% of the time, even if he's telling me no. You know what I mean?
I mean, we spoke about this last time about sort of the benefits of just relationship building and just sort of having this very sort of genuine approach with just interacting with people. And obviously Twitter's massive with, it's a great platform to be able to help people sort of really take advantage of that in a good way. But for you, I mean, have you always sort of, I mean, you get it. I mean, the way that you talk about it, I mean, this is something that you're aware of. You've got the self-awareness to be able to understand how it works, and you're doing it for the right reasons as far as building connections with people, and it's not so much for an immediate win or an exchange or anything like that. It's just a case of just having good people around you. But your background, I mean, is this something that you've always had as far as sort of being very aware of just having relationships with good people in your life?
Well, sort of. Well, yes and no. I mean, it's more like, I think it's, again, it comes back to that sales background where it's kind of like, if you don't keep top of mind with someone, they're going to forget about you. You know what I mean? So, and I mean, obviously I can't always keep top of mind with everybody. People, you do drop off with people. I mean, I just emailed someone the other day that I realized I hadn't, mailed at all in like 6 or 7 months. So it does happen, but I mean, you do your best. And just to completely answer your question, I think it's more comes from that thing of just trying to be top of mind, so that way people don't forget about you is the main thing. And that's why we do the amount of me and Matt both do the amount of social media that we do. And we do all the podcasts we do and all the rest of it. It's just to stay top of mind, because like you said, there's all this noise out there. So most people, their version of noise is that they post once or twice a week.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? My version of noise is that I'm posting every fucking single review I've gotten for every single band I have every single day on Facebook. Plus I'm tweeting at least, 30, 40 times a day, answering all my tweets, answering all my messages, trying to post on Instagram and all the rest of that in between my actual quote unquote work of pitching, right? So
your screen time must be through the roof.
It is. Well, usually, I mean, not exaggerating. I mean, I'm almost always doing something on it, but it is work at the same time. Like a lot of times people will be like, oh, it doesn't really seem like you're pitching very much. You're spending all your time on Twitter. I see you on there like, 6 hours a day. And it's like, well, that actually helps me get reviews. That helps me get coverage and all the rest of that type of stuff. Like, I'll have bloggers reach out to me just as a result of a post I've made on social media. Doesn't happen every single day, but I will. And then plus I also get potential clients reaching out to me. It works when you consistently are using social media, but you have to do it a lot. And that's the thing, is most people don't want to do it a lot. So as a result, a lot of people aren't able to do full-time careers because of the amount of work you have to do in order to keep it going. Because I mean, if I don't continue to, promote myself and promote my bands, A, they don't make any press. So B, I'm not going to end up getting paid or getting for any further clients because they're not getting results. So if I'm not getting results, I'm eventually not going to get paid. So I have to do it.
I mean, I noticed that from my end, and I mean, I use social media a lot, but even part of me sort of thinks, like I'm not using it to its full potential. I'm still not using it enough, but I understand how people feel that maybe they become a bit of an annoyance when they continuously post on social media because they feel that, well, really, the reasonable sort of approach would be a post a day or something like that. And it's like, well, yeah, maybe, depending on the platform or whatever you're doing, but you have to keep it moving. And just because you think that the same person's reading the same post over and over again, the way that all these platforms work is that most of these people are never going to see your posts, or they might see 1 out of 20 or 1 out of 100. So to sort of, and flood's not the right word, because I think when people think of the word flooding, it's more of a case of just posting any sort of shit and just expecting it to connect. But it's, you still have to be intentional with what you do. But I just think that people have a real false sense of understanding what the potential is with social media and not actually using it to its full potential.
Well, there's another thing too, though, is a lot of people are scared or they're worried about what other people are going to think about them too, right? So, I mean, I can't say I'm never ever worried, about what people think about me, but like, I mean, I don't mind tweeting out something stupid. Matt will get horribly embarrassed by it, and and he'll be like, oh, you need to take this down. And I'll be like, why? It doesn't really matter. Like, how many, like, really not that many people are going to see it. You know what I mean? There was a really, really, really good, I can't remember, I think it was a book, might've been a webinar series with, Frank Kern and Grant Cardone, where they mentioned that people are not paying as much attention to you as you think.
Yep.
You know what I mean? They're not. And that even if you think everybody has read your post or everybody has seen what you're talking about, they haven't. And I'll give you an awesome example on this. I used to have a client who I'm not going to name, who I did a great job with, but they signed with a label that had an in-house PR. So I wasn't given the opportunity to do their next album, even though I did great with them. I had a great relationship with the band, the whole 9 yards. They were totally pleased with me. I didn't get a chance to do their next PR. But the singer messaged me last year and said, hey, man, we got a new album coming out. Would you like to hear it? I said, yes, of course. I'd love to hear it. Really enjoyed your album. Would love to hear it, even though you're not working with me. Send it on over. He did. I must have seen the message. But I think I was out at the time, and I saw the message and forgot about it. And I find out 5 months later that they put out a new album, and I had totally forgotten that I'd even had this conversation with this guy. And I was like, what the fuck? And so I pulled up my Facebook messages to message him back, go, why didn't you send me the album like you said? He'd sent it to me 5 months early. So, and it wasn't because I don't like the guy or anything. I actually wanted to hear it. I just, I'm out and about. I didn't, for whatever reason, I didn't, I forgot to hit, mark as unread so I'd be able to follow it up later. Mm-hmm. And I totally forgot about him. And even though this is like a band I liked, I was intending to listen to, but I just forgot about it, So, and the only reason why I remembered about them was because I saw a post later about it. I think it was like from a major site saying, this band has just released their new album and it's awesome. And I was like, oh, why didn't anybody tell me? So that's just one example right there.
Well, it's a great one because I've thought about all, like, whether it be me starting, in the whole podcasting space years ago, or even the band and just trying trying to get people's attention, and you send them messages, and then you're so scared of the follow-up. You're so scared of sending, hey, just want to make sure that everything's okay, did you get it, or anything like that, because you just feel that you're pissing people off, or you're gonna wreck any sort of relationship, and you think that the relationships that you may have are so fragile that a follow-up message or an email or whatever it might be would be like the tipping point of just destroying that relationship. And so I think people are just really apprehensive and worried about just basically. I think people just naturally have this sort of distaste for just talking something up or selling something about themselves or talking about themselves. I think there's only a very small percentage of people out there that really genuinely have no issues whatsoever with just talking themselves up all the time. And so I think people just get a little bit too modest for their own good, and as a result they suffer because they get forgotten. And I've heaps of people out there that I've tried to interact with over the years, and I made a lot of mistakes early in the piece by just being too scared to follow up, because I already thought that I was invading their space. I already thought I was being annoying. But then over time I just realized, I think it might have been Tim Ferriss or somebody else, that I was listening to a podcast, and they had this really good quote, and I don't know who originally said it, but it was something like, don't confuse malice with busyness. And just because somebody doesn't get back to you, or they don't read your message, or they don't respond, or anything like that, or they promise something and they don't fulfill it, doesn't mean that they're intentionally disrespecting whatever you're doing or whatever you're involved with, or not care about what you're doing.
100%.
It's just a case that people are busy. People just have stuff, and there's a lot of stuff to balance and juggle. So once I sort of
there's one other thing. There's one other thing too, though, is that on top of that is that most people are not going to be upset if you follow up. There's only a small percentage of people that are. I mean, I've had people get mad at me for following up. And here's what usually, in my experience, is the case. Either A, I said something stupid, or I approached it stupidly. That's usually number one. B, they're having a bad day. That's number two, and they don't really mean it. They're just being snarky. Like, I don't know about you, but I mean, like, I don't know how many times I've been interrupted while I'm working at home, by my kids or my wife or whatever. I snap at them and, what the fuck? But I'm not really, you know what I mean? But I'm not mad.
Yeah, definitely.
You're irritated at that moment, but you're actually not mad at them. And then they go away. They go, Curtis is being an asshole or whatever. you know what I'm talking about. I'm sure you 100%. Do, because everybody's had it, right? Every day. Yeah. See, there you go. So we've all done it. I do it almost every day too, because you're engrossed in your own thing, and then you see something pop up that you don't want to really deal with at that second, so you lash out at the other person, but it's really not them. It's just something else that's going on. So, but if they came to me later with the exact same thing, like my kids or wife or whatever, or cat or anybody, I'm going to respond completely differently. So you have to keep that in mind too, is a lot of times it's just the person's having a fucking bad day. So they put you on blast, but they're not going to do that later. Yep. And if they do consistently just put you on blast, you know what? You might want to just stop following up with them, because a lot of times you don't need them. There's so many people out there, like here, especially with PR, there's so many writers out there. There's so many publications that you don't need to be hung up on just one writer. So if you got this real asshole, and most writers are not assholes, there's only a real small percentage of people that are. But if you got this one person that's just consistently mean and like, why are you following up with me, that type of a thing, and just always being grouchy, you probably don't really need to deal with them.
That's right.
You know what I mean? So, I mean, especially at the larger publications, most of the people that write at those larger publications are generally, as a general rule, at least in metal, they really like the music. They're fans of the music. Sometimes there's, a new writer will get in there that's kind of snotty or whatever, but most of them are actual fans. They appreciate getting contacted. They appreciate getting asked to write stuff. But, just sometimes it's just like they're in the middle of something. They don't want to be bugged. Maybe you got them in the middle of a work call or something like that, and they saw your email and their boss was chewing them a new one, and they just decided to lash out at you. Anyways, that's my spiel.
It's so hard to remember those things in the heat of the moment, especially if you're already...
Totally.
For me, like when I was sort of first starting out to try and tell people about the things that I'm involved with, you're still trying to find a level of confidence in what you do. So you've got an element of being somewhat fragile, and you're already defensive, thinking that something bad's going to come back anyway. And so you're sort of already preempting that you're going to get a snappy response, or somebody's not going to care about you or what you do or anything like that. And so it creates this false sense of reality around you that ultimately just holds you back. And just understanding that, I mean, it's sort of like the people that have a bit of social anxiety. You walk into a crowded room and then you think everybody's looking at you and judging you or hanging shit on you for whatever you're wearing or what you look like or anything like that. But then once you realize that most people are probably in the same thought pattern as you, and they're all worried about themselves or their own little dramas, their own little stories, then you realize that actually no one, and as you know, and this is in a positive sense, no one actually cares. No one actually cares about you and what you do, because they're so engrossed in their own little worlds. And that, I mean, looking at it from the right way, it's a real positive, because then you know that you can sort of you can interact with people and not having to sort of instantly be in a defensive position, trying to battle somebody to try and win their affection over. And even just touching on what you said before about particular people who just notoriously are just angry people, or just upset people, or negative people. I think sometimes we get so fixated on one particular person, thinking that they're the gatekeeper and the person that's going to be able to bring the opportunities, and we start to put all the eggs into one basket mentally, and then we end up losing all these other opportunities that may, on the surface, may not seem like the initial sort of priority. But we need to be able to shift and understand when to pull the plug and say, well, okay, well, I've pushed as much as I feel is necessary with that particular avenue or that particular person. So let's reevaluate and go in another direction, just to save resources, save that mental energy that's just being wasted at the moment by thinking that this particular person or avenue is going to be the be all and end all.
Agreed. I mean, the other thing too is you also got to realize too is just the fact that, if you have something there that you're trying to get done and it's like a good thing, it's not something that's going to actually harm someone, and you're not doing something like that's a bad thing. And if you actually believe in what it is that you're trying to contact the person about, there's no reason why you should be worried about it. You know what I mean?
Well, that's right.
Like, what's the worst that's going to happen? I mean, a lot, like, just to go back a little bit to what you were saying, like, I've had times where it's been like, I've had a client be like, I want you to pitch me to this massive place. And I'll be like, there's no fucking way in hell this place will ever want to do anything with you. I don't really know anybody there or anything like that. I don't really have any contacts there. But then I'll do it, and all of a sudden I'll get told yes. And I'll be like, oh, shit. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It happens.
Yeah.
I've had that many, many times where it's been like the band, oh, we really have our heart set on this major publication. Be my major publication I've never talked to, I have no contacts with, and then I'll just randomly get in there and they'll be like, oh yeah, sure, we can do that. I'm like, oh, wow, okay, cool. And then it's like suddenly you got this new contact too. So, the worst thing that can ever happen is that you get told no by somebody, or they kind of snap at you, and then like, what's going to happen? They're going to kill you. You know what I mean? So, yeah.
I just find that it's the old saying, it doesn't hurt to ask. And I think the only time it does hurt to ask is how you actually ask. And so if you're coming in with the wrong intention or the wrong delivery or whatever that might be, and you're not considerate, pardon me, then obviously that's going to have a consequence. But there's no harm in throwing the hat in the ring and trying to see if there's an opportunity there, even if it does seem like it's slim. If you've got the intention there and you're coming at it from the right angle, then at least there's a chance instead of zero. You may as well give it a shot.
Yeah, and the other thing too is that, again, it's just like, if you get told no, who cares? You might get told no like 5 or 10 times, but you might get an 11th time get a yes. I mean, I've had that so many times with publications. Like, it took me years before I got any of my bands into a certain major publication. And now it's a lot easier for me because of the fact of, I guess, I don't know, maybe I've worn them down. I don't know. But, the persistence thing actually works. But again, it all depends on how you do it. Like you said, like if you go in with an entitled attitude, like, for example, if someone's trying to get on the Dumb and Dumbest podcast, I'm just going to use that as an example. Like if they came to me and they were like, yo, you need to book me on my podcast. I don't know who this person is. And you do it right now, kind of demanding it. I'd probably tell them to go fuck off. But I mean, but it depends, because if it was someone I knew, it might be a little bit different, right? So, but I mean, it all depends like on how you present yourself, because there's two things to keep in mind. Like, some people can be like, if some people say that they like flattery in order to get pitched to or get asked to do something, and most people do like flattery, but there's that insincere flattery that I don't like. Like, one thing that people will come up to me, they'll pitch me via Facebook or email or something about something, and the very first thing they'll do is they'll be like, how are your kids, or how is your wife? And I fucking hate that, because of the fact I know they don't care.
Yeah.
Well, they don't.
It's just
like,
small talk, isn't it? It's a box to tick. Yeah.
It isn't. Like Andy, for example, I have no idea if you have kids. I've never asked you about kids, because we're not talking about your kids. I don't know, because it's nothing to do with what you and I are talking about.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And if you do, you've never shared anything about them that I'm aware of.
Yeah.
So obviously it's a private thing. You know what I mean? At least as far as I can tell, unless I'm missing something.
Well, I don't have any. I've got a little bird, so there you go.
Okay, well, well, there you go. Okay, but still, but you know what I'm saying, right? Like,
I do.
You know, how's the wife? How's the kids? And you're like, well, why do you care? Like, what do you want? Right? Like, that to me is kind of like, it's almost like a car salesman trick to get you talking. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's not authentic. But if someone said to me, hey, Curtis, I've listened to the Dumb and Dumbest show, or, you know, I know you have the podcast, like to get my band interviewed on it, or I'd like to be interviewed on it, totally fine. But if you start, you know, asking me about my wife and kids first thing, I kind of think there's something wrong with you and that you're trying to scam me in some way.
Well, and I've always sort of, I mean, I've worked in office environments over the years, and the amount of small talk that happens in a stereotypical office environment is just, it does your head in, and
it does.
And people
It's
do
stupid.
it just as a reflex. They do it to get over a bit of anxiety of just interacting with people, or they've got an agenda and it's leading to something.
Yeah.
And so one thing that I've well, I'm certainly not great at it, but I'm getting better at doing it, is when I am contacting somebody for whatever reason it might be, that I always try to get straight into the point of what I want from them, or what I'm hoping to achieve at the start of the message. And then if there's pleasantries and there's things that make sense, and you want to make something a little bit personal, then you almost throw that down further into your message, because it's putting that order in place. Like, I'm contacting you with an intention, so here I am, like, being extremely upfront and honest and transparent here. I'm not beating around the bush. And then as a secondary thing, blah blah blah. Hope, using that example before, hope the family is well, hope the kids are well, etc., etc. And I think, not that people should take that approach if they're not being genuine, but I think it just comes across a hell of a lot better if you're just being sort of very honest with going, look, there is a reason why I'm speaking to you, and I'm happy to do it this way, and I'm not trying to beat around the bush, because I think it just comes back to the, being genuine and being sort of having the right intentions when you contact people. But I see it all the time, and even just from that podcast example of people trying to pitch themselves to be on the podcast. I mean, I get them every once in a while from people I'm not even aware of them. I've never seen their name. I don't know who they are. I'm trying to work out where there might be a mutual acquaintance or anything like that. And some of them are sort of almost this passive aggressive sort of approach. And I actually think they're probably trying to be funny, but it's so aggressive with the way that they're pushing themselves forward. And as you said before, sort of using that sort of example of, I should be on your show, or I should be on your podcast. And it's like, who the fuck are you? Like, you got to be joking. And it's interesting to see the way people interact, because you can see that people are thinking, they're thinking of some sort of strategy that's going to cut through the noise to get attention their way. But a lot of the time, like, you might get my attention, but it's not gonna last. I'm going to forget about those people very quickly.
Well, it's kind of the thing is, it comes back again to learning how to sell, right? Because you kind of got to know how to do it. Because some people do like the pleasantries. I don't. I don't think I've ever really done that. Like, people, I'm sure a veteran PR person, if they ever saw my pitches, would be just horrified, because basically it's like, hey, I got a band. Here's the style they are. Can you cover them? It's basically that. Like, there's really not much to it other than the fact of, I got this, it's a style, boom. But I somehow still get good results. And then, I'll see these other PRs, quote unquote pros who've been around longer than me, who'll have like these 2-page pitches on one band. Right. And I'll be like, wow, I just wrote 3 lines about it and I just got coverage in this major place. Right. So, you know what I mean? Right. It's like too much thinking going into it. Right. And I mean, all these people are getting hundreds of pitches a day. And, all I'm saying is basically, hey, I got this doom metal band. You want to hear it? Right. Or can you review it or interview them or whatever the heck it is that I'm saying. Right. So a lot of times I'll even do multiple bands on one email. I'll be like, hey, I'm working with 10 bands right now. Here are my top 3 priorities. You willing to interview or review any of them? Boom, boom, boom. Here's the style. Right. And, here's the link to listen, blah, blah, blah. Let's roll if you're into it. If not, thank you very much. Have a great day. And that works 90% of the time too. But here's the thing though, is that you kind of got to know, at the same time when you're cold pitching someone or trying to just approach someone for the first time, or even after a few times, you kind of got to do your homework and kind of have in this instinctive feeling about what works and what doesn't work with people. Like me, I'm pretty sarcastic a lot of the times, and sometimes that doesn't always translate with people. So sometimes I know I can come across if I'm on Twitter or if I'm on Facebook as being kind of arrogant, but I'm just a normally sarcastic individual, right? So one thing that I do is I try not to do that as much as possible when it's someone new, because of the fact most people tone doesn't translate in print.
No.
You know what I mean? I don't know if you're being antagonistic, you're being silly, or if you don't know if I'm being silly or anything like that, unless we've kind of been conversing back and forth for a little bit, right? So if I'm going to approach, if I wanted to approach you, for example, and we didn't know each other, I wouldn't come in at you with sarcasm. But I've had people do that with me, and I don't know whether they're psychotic. I don't know if they're being funny. But you know what I mean, right? It's it'll be a weird joke, and you're like, okay, is this guy a weirdo or is he just being funny? I can't tell, And his avatar will be someone that's Jason, from Friday the 13th, and you're like, I don't know, but it's you can't.
But it's the Twitter. No, sorry, I'm just that quick thought. I mean, it's like all the Twitter talk we've been discussing. It's sort of when you're building sort of very, it's not the right word I'm thinking of, but it's almost like these indirect relationships by sort of being in this space where people are just sharing thoughts and comments and commentary, and then you sort of reply to people, and you might interact and just do a little bit of that social media love and things like that. People start to see your personality come through over time. It's sort of like a gradual thing that people start to, you're painting a picture of who you are and your personality in sort of this holistic sort of way. And so then when it does come time for the direct message or the direct email to talk about something that might be a little bit more business related, that person's got a little bit more of a rounded understanding of who you are. And I think even for me, there have been people that have come to me directly, and it might be something band related or podcast related, but I've seen them interact with me out of the blue over a series of months. They've never said anything to me about anything whatsoever, just having a chat and just being very casual, and then eventually contacting me. And it's not something that I was aware of in the moment as this is all happening, but in hindsight, when you look back, you go, well, the likelihood of me paying attention to what they're saying now or wanting to help them or do anything is so much higher because I've got all this prior context. I know who this person is to a degree. I know what their mannerisms are like, and I know sort of, I've got a bit of a judgment as to whether this person's a good person or not. And so suddenly my attention is a lot higher with that particular person and whatever requests they might have. But coming in cold and then having all of that personality dripping through that email straight off the bat from 0 to 100, and you go, whoa, what am I dealing with here? I've got no idea. Am I going to be interacting with somebody that I'm going to regret later because I won't be able to get rid of them and they become, as you said, psychotic or something like that? Or is this actually a really great person and maybe, I could be missing out on an opportunity? You just go, oh man, I'm going to take the conservative approach here and probably not interact.
Well, that's the thing too, right? And one thing I want to point out as well, which goes along with it, I am replying, although it might not seem like it, is make sure that your avatar that you have in your profiles isn't something weird, because that makes a huge difference in how a person perceives you. Like, again, if you got like the Jason avatar, or you got a picture of, I don't know, just something odd there. And you guys all know what I mean when I say odd.
I do.
You know, or, you know, it's like a picture of a pot leaf, or, you know, like a bunch of Jack Daniels bottles or something, you know what I'm saying, right?
Yeah.
So, you know, you kind of look at this and you're like, what am I dealing with here, right? Am I dealing with a redneck? Am I dealing, you know, like, I don't know, like, who is this person, right? Because one thing, the avatar does make a huge difference. And if it's just like, you know, this weird picture, and you're like looking at this picture, you don't know, like, that makes an impression in my mind of whether I want to deal with you or not right off the bat. And sometimes that's not correct.
No, that's right.
Right? Like, I've had people with weird avatars who ended up being, you know, they were good people, and I didn't know it at first, but I kind of backed off on really dealing with them because, you know, their picture looked weird, right? And people do judge books by their cover, right? You know, I've made this mistake in the past where it's, you know, all I would have was have the Dewar PR logo on everything. There was no picture of me. Now I have my picture there, and I mean, it's not the world's greatest picture, but at least you see there's an actual individual there. You know what I mean? So, you know, but you'll get like these weird but you'll get like a message that you can't quite determine the tone of, along with a weird picture. And that makes the individual either not want to reply to you or not want to deal with you, when in actual fact, you could have had a great opportunity if you hadn't had that there. Even with your email address too. Like, I've had people send me stuff like, you know, I kill blah, blah as my email, as their email.
Yeah.
You know, and you're like, okay, like, is this a kid? Like, what is this? Right. So you don't, like, it doesn't look like it's serious, right? So you kind of got to take that into account too. And I mean, I've made all these mistakes too in the past. So I'm talking from experience. I'm not talking down to anybody. But I mean, like, if you're going to have like a cartoon as your avatar, like, you have a great cartoon as your avatar, but it's you.
Yeah.
Right. It's not like Mickey Mouse. It's not fucking Donald Duck, you know, smoking a joint or something stupid like that. Right. It's you. Right.
Yeah.
So, and it's got your name next to it. So so if you were to contact me and all I saw was that, I know it's not your avatar right now, but if it was, I would be comfortable talking to you because it's an actual human, not something strange. So you kind of got to keep that in mind as well when you're doing the pitch, is like, how do you appear? And you have to keep in mind that just because you think something's funny, you know, Donald Duck smoking a blunt while stabbing Mickey Mouse is funny, you know, doesn't mean anybody else is necessarily going to get the joke right off the bat. You know what I mean? Like, if I see something like that, I might think that's funny, but if I see someone with a Facebook profile like that trying to friend me, I'm probably going to ignore them because I'm going to think there's some fucking weirdo. You know what I mean?
Well, I think the big thing I always look at, and there's so many. I mean, Facebook's and Facebook and Twitter are probably the worst for it. But you know, when you do see that avatar of a sunset or the marijuana leaf or whatever it might be, I think there's, at least what it tells me is that somebody's not willing to disclose themselves or share themselves with me. Like there's and it might not be 100% correct, but you know, they might not be willing to. Or they're trying to hide something or something hidden there. And that might not be the complete reality to it, but it's almost like, well, you're approaching me to connect and potentially wanting something from me. You're aware of who I am. You can see my face, you can see what I'm doing and who I'm all about, but you're not willing to, you know, unveil, you know, the curtain from your end. So how I can only interact so much with somebody that's not willing to show themselves, so to speak, and share themselves. And it's very hard to build a one-way relationship with somebody. And I know some really good friends of mine who have got some of these avatars, and I laugh because, I mean, that's just their style. That's just the way that they do it. But it depends on what you're using social media for, of course. But if you're using it with the intention to build relationships and networks with people and ultimately drive an outcome of, you know, building a business or whatever that might be, then it's very limiting. So I can certainly appreciate that. And I've had chats to friends of mine who just go, oh man, I can't get a foot in. I go, well, look. you might have to take a different approach here, and but then on the flip side, some of these people will turn around and say, well, I don't want people to know who I am. I don't want people to be able to find me. And it's like, well, that's perfectly fine. But at the same time, if you want people to understand who you are, then you've got to be able to reveal yourself a bit. So it's a difficult thing. And I see that all the time. I see it on Twitter a lot. People following me, and then we'll make some commentary on a post. And I always have Gary Vee stuck in the back of my head where I should be acknowledging, commenting on every single interaction that I get, because it drives a lot of great perceptions, and it obviously helps in a lot of different ways. But sometimes I look at some comments, I go, I don't really, even though I'm not following you back or whatever it might be, I don't even know where this is coming from. I don't know the context of what you're saying. I don't get the joke, or who are you? Like, there's nothing in your profile that gives me any hints of where you're located, who you are, and what are you into or anything. And then the posts that they have, I'm trying to flick through their feed, and I can't get a grasp of who they are. They're so mysterious, and I'm like, well, how do I build banter? How can I do banter with you? How can I go back and forth? And so it's a very difficult thing, and I think for a lot of us, we sort of look at those people and go, well, is it more of a trolling sort of approach that these people are taking, where they're not actually they're hoping to get a rise out of somebody rather than actually anything meaningful. So but I think a lot of people lack the self-awareness to understand what sort of perception they put out there just by some of those what may seem very trivial decisions that you make when you get onto the internet.
Yeah, well, the other thing too is that you also have to. I don't know how you do this, but I know with me, as I try to assume that when I get someone reaching out to me, that their intent is good. They aren't just sitting there to troll me. I try to take that viewpoint at first, but if it starts to appear to me like that's all they're interested in, I'll quickly shut the communication off. But I always try to go from the viewpoint that, they're sincere, that they're actually trying to, reach out in good faith or that type of thing. And only, if it really becomes obvious that they're a bad intent or whatever, do I stop it. But then again, at the same time, there are people that are just sarcastic that's how they interact. But again, if you are naturally sarcastic, I would watch that until you've been talking to the person for a little while. Like, for example, I tweeted out last week to you and multiple people, what's your favorite band? Theory of a Dead Man, Nickelback, or I can't remember what the third one was. It was an obvious troll.
Yeah.
It was an obvious troll. And you guys know me. Right? You guys all knew that. Everybody I fucking said it to fucking knew I was just playing around. And so, and that was intentional because I was trying to get a rise out of someone else that was not you guys, because I just was trying to get interaction. It was to me, it was an obvious ploy. And I think all of you guys kind of knew that at the same time. So, but there was actual people, they're like, actually I like this Nickelback song. And I was like, yeah, me too. I actually like all three of those bands. I can't remember what the third one was, but it was like, I was just being silly, and you played along. You're like, yeah, well, actually, I think wasn't Rush. You said there wasn't. Who was it?
Oh, Harum Scarum. This is my favorite Canadian band.
Scarum.
Yeah.
That's right. So, we actually had some rapport develop as a result of that, because you talked about your favorite Canadian band. But, it depends. Like, if you're going to troll someone and like have fun with people, like, you got to kind of know who the person is first, because otherwise they can get offended. Definitely. But I hope the people that I was doing that to on Twitter know me well enough, I think they do, to know that I'm playing along, but I actually do legitimately enjoy all three of those bands at the same time. So I'm poking fun at myself, right?
And I see things like that, and I laugh, but then I also, this is Gary Vee sort of stuff floating through, but I go, awesome. There's a conversational starter here where you can start to talk about things like and go off on a whole range of different tangents. And it's almost like, okay, in my head it was like, Canadian bands. And I started thinking about, okay, what other great bands are from Canada? And I'm like, of course, like my all-time favorite band. And so for me, I get excited about that stuff because it's stuff that, it's probably a bad way of describing it, but it feeds the machine, but it also just helps keep that conversation going on that platform. And so I love that sort of stuff. And you sort of see it from a bunch of different angles and go, like for me, I was like, well, no, I don't like those bands, but I was like, but I totally understood where you were coming from with it. And I see, I laugh. And the reason why I get that is, yes, I've listened to your podcast. we've obviously, I think when you posted that was just after we had the last chat. But even before that, I mean, we've been interacting for some time now, and I see the banter that you have with Matt in particular. So I see even that alone, I've got enough context to see a bit of your personality, a bit of your sort of a little bit of probing or prodding, I should say, just to get a bit of a fun rise out of a situation or a topic or whatever it might be, and just get something started, and a bit of sarcasm there. And so for me, just watching how you've interacted with other people, and that's the great thing about Twitter, is that you don't always necessarily have to interact with everybody, but you can see what people are doing and what they're chatting about, and back and forth. And so it paints a really interesting picture. So even for people out there that use Twitter and may not get a lot of activity back, just your activity in the way that you talk to your inner circle can be seen by a lot of other people. And so, you might have some really...
And it gets a lot of engagement outside of it. That's the cool part.
That's exactly right. And so you might think that people aren't paying attention to what's going on, but you'll be very surprised. There's a lot of people out there that have no willingness or urge or anything like that to even give you a little love heart or a retweet or a comment whatsoever, but they're reading it and they're taking it in, and a lot of them, depending on what you're doing, will be mildly entertained with what you've got to say, and you don't know that, but it's a massive thing when you're putting yourself out there on a public platform. So I just to sort of round it out, I think just knowing you and seeing your banter over however long that we've sort of been connected, gives it so much more context when I do see posts come from you.
Yeah. Well, I mean, at the same time, I mean, I think people know as a general rule, when I'm doing something like that, it's half kidding, it's half serious, but it's there to get engagement. And a lot of times I'll just tweet something like that at a person just to get them to respond, like someone who hasn't been on Twitter for a long time. Like, for example, Monica Strutt went off Twitter for, I think it was like a week at one point. And finally I tweeted like something about Motley Crue at her. To get her to respond, right? I said, which I think it was something like, which Motley Crue member are you, Monica? Or are you Nikki Sixx or Vince Neil? I can't remember. It was something stupid like that, right? Yeah. Like an obvious thing. And then she tweeted back who it was, and she said, "Oh yeah, I can tell that you're trying to get me to respond to something. I need to be more active on Twitter." And I was like, "Yeah, you're right." And I'll do the same. I'll do the same thing to people like. My friend Julio Ray, who was in a Christian metal band called The Lead from the 80s, he'll go off Twitter for a few weeks, or, I won't see him tweet or anything. So I'll randomly go like, "Hey man, what's your favorite Slayer song?" And I'll pick like these 3 real super satanic songs. He likes Slayer, right?
Yeah.
He actually does like Slayer, right? So I'll tweet it to him or something like that just to get him to respond. And he knows me well enough now that he knows I'm trolling him, but I'm not trolling at the same time. I'm just trying to get him to respond and talk back, right? So it's kind of like, I guess the main moral from this part of the conversation is at least know your audience and kind of like know when to joke, when not to joke, when to be serious and when not to be serious. And if you're stepping over the borders and someone's like really getting upset with you, cool it down.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, you got to know where the line is. Make sure you don't cross it, or at least stand all over it. Yeah, and I mean, one thing that I've heard you speak about this on your podcast in the past is a bit of your Twitter game and sort of some of the, I guess, thoughts or approaches that you take with how you utilize Twitter. One of them that you spoke about a while back was doing all these Twitter polls that you do, and I find that really fascinating in the sense that, I mean, you'll be able to speak to it, but it appears from the outside that it's a way to get engagement from people. People like to share their opinion. The way that Twitter only allows you to have whatever it is, 4 options or 4 or 5 options or whatever, means that you can't list every song from an album when you ask people for their favorite album, but you've got one of those selections being other, and then in brackets something like say what it is, and so that encourages people to put their opinion in. And that obviously is gold for any social media platform when you've got engagement. Is that something that was a bit of an idea or a strategy that you're going to take, or did you just do it for fun and then sort of thought in hindsight, oh, actually, this could be something good that I should do more often?
Well, that was exactly what it is. As I did that, I've been doing that for about a year now, every single fucking day. Sometimes it's repeated, but the main reason why is to get interaction, if nothing else. And I'll tell you something, is that a lot of the people that interact with that are people that will never be PR clients of mine because they're just music fans.
Yep.
But the thing is that when I then go and retweet a track that has been played by one of my bands, or if I tweet about one of my bands, or if I retweet a piece of positive press, or I talk about a positive piece of press, that is now more likely to get clicked through by one of those music fans as a result. And I have had people tell me who I know have nothing to do with music writing, that they have checked out one of my bands because of the fact that I shared that press with them. And the reason why that person is a follower of mine is because they do my Twitter polls, right?
It's great.
So it is, and that's the only reason. Like, I've had someone once said to me, none of these people that are responding to your polls are ever going to be clients. I'm like, I don't fucking care. It's getting attention to my bands. My tweet is going up in the algorithm. More people are seeing it as a result. If every time a tweet gets interacted with, more people see it, because the way Twitter works is that when people like or respond to something, to someone that they're following, it will then show up on other people's feeds who aren't following you.
That's right.
So here's the thing is, back in, I think it was December, there was a whole thing where it was like, quote, tweet this with your blah, blah. So I started doing that. And what I did one day is I said, quote, tweet this with your favorite Black Sabbath cover. And that fucking tweet took off all over the place. I had Doc Coyle retweet me. I had fucking Paulo from Trivium retweet me. It just went all over the fucking place, just as a result of, like, these people have never followed me or anything, and they never will. But my tweet got in front of like hundreds and hundreds of thousands of people, saw my name because of that. And I know I got followers off that. I got something like 50 or 60 followers just as a result of that one tweet, asking a stupid question about what's your favorite Black Sabbath cover of all time, right? Like, cover song. So, that, like, a lot of people will go like, well, it's stupid because it isn't really your audience. Well, that's not true. Like, especially like someone like you who's in a band, anybody that retweets your Andy Dowling account, because you got a link, I believe, to Lord on your Twitter account, do you not? Or my mistake? You do, right?
Yeah. There'll be a link to either band or mine.
Yeah. So almost anybody that converses with you, well, I find in my experience from talking to people that most people, when they start conversing with you, will generally take a look at your profile and they'll click a couple of links that are sitting there.
Yep.
Or a link, rather, that's sitting there. So just as a result of you interacting with people, you're going to get more people going to the Lord Bandcamp or whatever link it is that you have set up there, because of the fact that you're just talking with people. And the more times you tweet and the more your tweets get interacted with, the more people they're going to do it. It's like basically free fucking advertising for you, even though it's not the Lord account. You're still the ambassador and the spokesman, sort of. So, I mean, I guess you are the spokesman, but you know what I mean?
Yeah. I mean, I guess from our band, I'm definitely the most vocal out of the lot. So I guess, it could be seen like that. But I think also this is why sort of individuals and the way that we interact as individuals is so important, because I think we all, this is sort of, selling 101, is that we sort of almost sold an idea from an individual. Like, we connect with a person, we connect with something because somebody that we look up to or respect or whatever it is using that product or service or whatever it might be. And so it's not so much the service itself or the brand itself that wins you over immediately. There has to be, in a lot of cases, some sort of gateway person, individual, some sort of influencer to help win somebody over. And so for me, like, I mean, I can post a lot of stuff out of the Lord Twitter page or Facebook or whatever it might be, but it's almost like going back to the avatar thing. I mean, you still don't know who in the band or who's actually posting from the band account. So you're still sort of hidden behind the collective. Whereas for me on my personal account, there's no guessing. It's just me. So there's nobody else there. So it's sort of like this soft way of, and we've spoken about this before, but it's sort of like that soft way of getting people to check out what you do and what you're all about is by building those sort of personal or direct connections with people. But there's one point though, Andy, that maybe you're going to get to it. Maybe I cut you off too soon, but one important point is that when you have the personal account, people are more inclined to respond to you, because band accounts as a whole, at least it seems from my perception, a lot of times have, as a general rule, taken to spamming people, Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So if you're interacting with people as the band account, I don't know what it is, but I know if a band account interacts with me rather than a personal account, it just seems kind of weird because it's like a group versus me, the individual. You know what I'm saying? But if I'm talking
there's almost an agenda behind it.
Yeah, it kind of seems that way, and I know most people don't intend to do that, and I realize that, right? But that's kind of why I put the Dewar PR account on Twitter. It just says Curtis, but it says at Dewar PR. Like I changed the name from Dewar PR. I put my picture up there, few years ago or whatever it was. Once I realized it, because it looks like, when a band group, quote unquote, of band members are contacting you, it just seems weird.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And you don't know if it's like a social media manager, if it's a girlfriend or a boyfriend, you know what I mean? It's just this weird thing. But anyways, I cut you off. I'm sorry.
No, I mean, and it's exactly right. And I think that's why it's so important for people to really sort of, especially, I mean, the people that make this decision to get out there in the public domain in a way where you're trying to sell an idea of some sort, whether it be your creative output or a business or whatever it might be. You have to put yourself out there as an individual. I mean, that's the whole sort of storyline of business, where people connect with story and they connect with things that they can relate to, or like-minded people. And if you don't have those sort of those hooks, those things that drag is probably not the right word, but that bring people in, because they can relate to it, then it's very, very difficult. So you can't just hide behind a brand only or a business name or something like that without having some sort of personality attached to it. So yeah, I mean, that's been a great thing with social media. I've found that, because I can't always rely on my guys either, in my band, to be injecting personality or individual personality into what we do. So if we just had band accounts and that's it, then there's only going to be so much that I can put out there, to try and connect people together. And so for me, it's like, well, I can go out there and, as wanky as it sounds, create my own brand by just being me and being willing to interact with as many people as possible and just building these great connections. Then as a result of that, then other opportunities will come in, with more attention going to the things that I'm associated with. But totally. Yeah.
As long as you make it clear who you're with, that's the key point.
That's right. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. You don't want to be vague with it, or I actually, it's quite funny and maybe it's an intentional thing by some musicians in particular, but I'll, like even some of your follow posts. So you did one, today, which was the hashtag FF follow. Was it Follow Friday, something like that? And so you got a bunch of people on there, and so every once in a while, I usually follow most of the people that are on those lists, just to build the network, and it's a great way to sort of bring people together and interact a little bit. But every once in a while, I'll look at one of those profiles, and there's nothing on there. Like there's their name, and they've got no links, they've got nothing, but then they've got a lot of followers, and I'm like, who's this person? So then, for me, like I'm probably a little bit more curious than your average person. So then I'll try and Google their name or whatever the account is to see whether it pops up in an article or something else, just to try and put the dots together. But in some cases, it's a case of this person's obviously influential or has some sort of following in their own circle, but they're not really willing to extend that circle any further than what they already have. And so then part of me is like, well, how much energy do I put into interacting with this person if I don't really, like, it looks like I'm going to have to put the effort in to try and understand who they are without me potentially feeling like I'm going to be an idiot because maybe I should know who they are or whatever it might be. So it's very, very interesting that, and it's a good point because, I know people that have success in their own domain, and put themselves out there publicly on social media. But if you clicked on their profile and you didn't have the context, you wouldn't know who the hell they are. And maybe they like it that way. But it's difficult if you want to continue to build the community.
It is. I mean, sometimes I'll confess to you that sometimes I'll put people that I just have interacted with that I think have absolutely no connection to the industry whatsoever, just on my Follow Friday, if that ever has made you wonder. Like, I know there's one guy named Mick Davidson. I don't think he has any connection to the industry whatsoever, but he's always interacting with me on Twitter. So for the last 4 weeks or so, he's on there. And I think it doesn't matter. I don't care. He talks to me a lot. So as far as I'm concerned, follow the fucking guy. Maybe he does have a connection to the industry, and I just don't know. But I can't tell by his profile. So if he does, and he's listening to this, well, Nick, fix your profile.
But I mean, that goes back to what we were saying before. It's like, it's building these interactions with people and sort of encouraging. Obviously you've got somebody that you can see is active, and so you want to continue to encourage that engagement. And so whether it be having Nick now follow a bunch of other people and give value to those other people, or vice versa, Nick feels value because he's getting some people interacting with him, or whatever it might be, then it's all positives.
It is, and I've made a friend as a result of it because he's interacted with me, so I interact with him, and it's all good. One other thing I want to point out just about the Follow Friday thing is, you're 100% right, is that you should always make sure that there's enough context for you, because if someone does shout you out, that can potentially be valuable, especially like, let's say, for example, if I randomly, I'll sometimes do something funny, like I'll randomly stick in like Follow Friday, Ty Lopez in there in the middle of it or something like that, right?
Yeah.
Guy's got 3.2 million followers. So if he randomly likes that tweet, it's going to move way up in the algorithm, right?
Absolutely.
So if that happens and you want to get some followers, it's good to have, all your information in the profile just on the odd chance. And also, like, for example, Trevor from Black Dahlia Murder will frequently like my tweets. He's got quite a few followers as well. So it's just like, if I'm talking to you and he's like the tweet, because he'll talk, like whenever I talk about Megadeth, he almost always jumps in. Yep. He fucking loves Megadeth, I guess. So he's right in there every fucking time. Sometimes, a lot of times he'll interact with my polls and stuff. So if you're in on that tweet thread and he responds, that tweet is going to move up in the algorithm. So make sure you have all your details in there on what you want followed, because people will check you out. There's my toot my own horn.
No, definitely. Oh, I tell you what, there's been a couple. I wouldn't be able to give you the examples, but there has been a couple of those Follow Fridays that you've done, and you throw in somebody into the mix that's got like a super high follow count. I might not even identify who they are to begin with, but I'll be like, how does he know that person? Because I just assumed I've assumed,
I don't.
yeah. And I've assumed that this is your community. These are people that you've had some sort of connection with in the past. And so I go, whoa, geez, Curtis, like you've got a pretty strong network here. If you've got a little inroad with this particular person, wow. And
not really. No. Well, but I got a follow from Michael Sweet from doing that. Though,
yeah, nice, cool.
From Striper.
Yeah, Striper.
Yeah, so it works sometimes. Anyways, go ahead. I just wanted to point that out, that I don't always know these people.
No. But it's funny how, it's a perception thing as well. It's there's a lot of different reasons or different reasons behind an intent to interact with people, and sometimes perceptions can be created without even being completely aware of it either. So it's just funny, like your logic as far as when you do something like that versus the way that I first started interpreting it, going, oh geez, like, because I'm still trying to learn about you and what you do, and then I'm thinking, wow, okay, maybe Curtis is a busy guy behind the scenes. He's really with some big movers and shakers,
Well, most. Let me just clarify though. Most of the people I do know, most, not all.
Yeah, absolutely. I just think it's smart. It's smart social media, with the way that you're sort of thinking ahead as far as the possibilities. It's almost like going back to contacting people again, and people that might seem out of your league, sort of on a day-to-day basis, but you've got to throw it in there. You've got to be in it to win it, and so it's a case of setting yourself up in a way that there's potential, there's opportunities there, and what's the other thing about luck? Luck's not just sitting around doing nothing. Luck's like making sure that you're working to get into a position where there's an opportunity for luck. It's now you know what I'm going to be doing for the rest of the day. Now I'm just going to be on Twitter. I'm going to be an absolute nuisance if I'm not already. Good. So but I love this sort of stuff because it's a very sort of strategic way of doing it, but it's also really fun, and it builds great relationships with people. There's obviously, we all are looking to do things in our own domains, and we all want to get better and build whatever we're doing. But at the same time, there's a lot of additional benefits that come out of it, which is building great friendships with people. So it's Yeah, it's exciting. I love this sort of stuff because it's a trial and error sort of thing. There's a bit of strategy behind it. I think it's a bit of a game in a way because you're experimenting, just seeing what works, what doesn't, and you have fun with it. And especially when you can see like people within your circles trying the same things, you know what they're doing, and it's fun because then you can sort of make a decision as to how you interact with that to see whether you can help with it or not, and it's fun.
Well, the other thing too, though, is that also if you give a shout out to someone that you don't know, that can actually allude to you being able to get the connection at some point. Like I'm just looking over the Follow Friday today. There's only one person on that list that I am not actually ever been connected to, and that's Chandler Mogul. And the reason why, I would like to connect with him because I've listened to a bunch of his music. He seems like a very authentic individual. He seems like someone I'd like to actually have on the podcast at some point. So, and he doesn't have a ton of followers either. So I figured I can add him on there. Maybe I can give him some followers, flow some, give him some, something. And then maybe next time when I'm trying to email him and I say, hey, I would like to have you on the podcast or something like that, he might open my email now because he's seen me as the guy on Twitter that shouted them out a couple times saying, hey, follow Chandler. You know what I mean?
Playing the long game.
Yeah, I am, because it gets your name in front of people. So it's like you're not doing it to suck up or kiss ass or anything like that. It's basically just to kind of get your foot in the door and get people's attention. So, if you're trying to get the attention of, for example, Vince Neilstein of Metal Sucks, the owner of Metal Sucks, and you're a band, and all you're doing is tweeting at him, Vince, check out my shit. He's, he's not going to respond to you. But I'll give you a really good example. There was a band that, I forget the band's name, but I had contacted them. I think their name's Granshaw. Don't quote me on that. I might have the name slightly off. But they're a death metal band. And they've talked to me and Matt before. They've asked us for advice, and we've given it to them. But they actually got featured on Metal Sucks not that long ago because they interacted with Vince on Twitter, and they asked him some questions about something that had happened to them that they thought might be kind of shady. And they actually just had a conversation with him, and as a result, Vince wrote an article about them. And that was just from them being on Twitter. But I can guarantee you, if all they had been doing is just tweeting their link at them and they hadn't actually been trying to have a conversation with them, that would never have happened. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And it's just the same thing happens all the time with other writers. But the trick is you have to actually be engaging, not just pushing yourself.
That's right. You've got to be giving. You can't just be expecting something in return all the time. It's like, how do I give value, or whether it be just making somebody feel wanted as far as being a source of information and advice or something like that, or actually being able to provide something tangible, whatever it might be, without any strings attached, with no expectations whatsoever, and being able to walk away with it, which is very difficult for a lot of people because we're very, I think many of us are sort of, we want instant gratification. We want to be able to get the reward. We're very transactional in day-to-day behavior. And so, when something happens, you're instantly thinking, well, it's now or never. I've got to milk this opportunity, and usually that's when things fizzle out very, very, very quickly. So it's a case of it's this planting seeds approach where it's just a case of just interacting, being as helpful and as being as generous with your time, and
that's the key.
Making people feel good, and then whatever comes of it is whatever comes of it.
100%. That's the real key, is that when you're actually trying to assist the person versus just trying to take, you're liable to get a lot more favors. Like, here's a good example is last week. I offered to do PR for your single.
Oh, no.
I'm not going to charge you.
I laughed. No, I didn't. And I laughed when you said that. I was really surprised, and I was very happy that you offered it. But I laughed because I just thought, this is exactly what we were just talking about. And I thought, is he trying to prove a point with me now, just to demonstrate this?
No, not at all. But because of the fact you've had me on as a guest twice. You've never asked me. You haven't asked me for anything. No. You haven't. No. Like most people by now would have been plugging, asking me for all sorts of advice on how to run a campaign and all sorts of intimate details. And you didn't do that. So I was just like, okay, I would like to do something for Andy at some point, because, the other thing too is that you're out there busting your ass all the time promoting Lord, and Lord is a good band. You know what I mean? this is something that you're actually pushing yourself. You're not like some random band that's like never doing anything. Those are the type of people I like to help, or the people that are putting in the effort. Yeah. Like a lot of times I'll do things for free for people or for extremely cheap just on my own origination when it's someone who like works really hard and they're actually trying to do something. A really good example is that there was recently, I'm not going to name their name, but I have a client, they're pretty well known, but at the same time, they've given me referrals. They do all the interviews I've ever asked them to do very quickly. They're very responsive. They bust their ass as a musician. They're doing it full time and all the rest of it. So whenever I see that person might need some help, I just originate the help to them. And I've had them say to me, well, don't you want to be paid? And I'll be like, well, with you, it's okay.
Yep.
You know what I mean? Just because of all the stuff that they've done for me and stuff like that. And I even went and helped one of their friends as a result without them even asking me. Just no charge, just because of the fact that this other person had helped me so much and had been such a good client. Like when someone's like that, you want to, at least with me, I don't mind, assisting them and, trying to do things for them. But other people, not necessarily, you know what I mean? And I'm not saying that if I've never offered you to do something for free for you, that means I don't like you. It's not, but it's just like, if I'm going to do something, that's how I'm going to do it. Like I'm going to do something for free or for lower cost because I do this full time for my income and I got 2 kids and I got a wife and the whole 9 yards. I'm very not strategic necessarily about who I do things for, but I'm more careful. I usually only do it I usually invest my time in people that I think are going to try to do something themselves, if you get what I'm saying.
Yeah, definitely. But also, I don't think there's a lot of overly conscious sort of thought or intention when you make those decisions on the fly, because it's a natural thing. No, there's already been sort of a natural, organic sort of connection that's been built, and so just it's a case of time and space and things just fall into place, and suddenly that's front of mind and it's an idea, and it's like, well, okay, that feels right, and so I'm going to do it. And even like the way that I sort of I especially I'm just sort of thinking back to some of my sort of early starts in all of this, like I was always very transactional, and I always just thought the only way to get anything was just to keep asking for things all the time. And I learned very quickly that it's very limiting. But one thing that helped take the edge off it and help me enjoy the long game is that I get so much out of people by just being around them, whether, online Twitter and Facebook and all this sort of stuff, or even this podcast, great and a very, it's very obvious, but in the same way, very sneaky way of being able to connect with people is to be able to have them on and have a chat to them for an hour or so and just pick their brain or get their insights on stuff. And I learned so much, and it's a way of just sort of not immediately trying to take advantage of somebody. It's just a case of just being around them. And then if things, if there's a time and a place that it makes sense to go back to that sort of direct question or request or whatever it might be, then that's fine. But it's always a case of just, I'll just absorb whatever I can, wherever I can. And I can do that without actually forcing that person to really sort of overinvest their time for me. So it's massive, and it's taken the edge off considerably, because I know that a lot of this is in my own court. My own development, my own learning, getting better it's all on me. Like nobody's going to give me a shortcut. I might get an opportunity and I might get lucky with something, but that's going to be off the back of me putting in the hours to begin with. So, I can always look inside first before looking outside.
Yeah, because if you're not willing to put your own work in, no one's going to ever take a chance on you or help you with anything like that. That's one key thing that I've always learned is, like, if you're kind of out there almost like, and I don't want to sound like an asshole, like as a beggar type thing, most people that are more successful in any industry don't really take well to begging or anything like that. I think pretty much everybody that does that, not everybody, but most people do want to help other people. But when it's kind of like in the mode of like, poor me, I'm a victim, you need to help me, that's when nobody really wants to deal with you, right? But if it's kind of like, you're trying your best and that type of thing, you're going to be given more opportunities than if you're being a whiner for lack of a better word. And I hope that doesn't come across as being completely cold or anything like that, because it's not intended to be. But like, for example, like last year when we first met Monica Strutt, I mean, I did my best to help her. I tried to give her props. I went and helped her out with Last Martyr PR for North America and stuff like that. And the reason why, and she didn't ask me for any of this, and the reason why was because of the fact that I saw she was putting in a really big effort on both her consulting and with her own podcast and with her band and the whole 9 yards. And, I believe, and I'm pretty sure she would tell you this, and maybe I'm mistaken, that we've gotten her, somewhat known outside of Australia as a result of that, which I think is really, really fucking cool. And I mean, a lot of people would say she's a competitor to us, but at the same time, I don't care, because of the fact of, I'd rather have her as an ally, because she's someone that is actually trying, and she's doing things to help people. And she's not just someone who's like, take, you know what I mean? So I'd rather build her up. And even if she did take some business away from me, I really don't care, because there's way more clients out there.
Well,
you know what I mean?
Well, that's right. And I think also, I mean, I just watched her webinar, the replay of her webinar that she put out the other day, and and it was interesting to watch it and how she's put it together, and I had a quick message back and forth with her about a week ago, and she made a quick comment just saying, look, she's really nervous about this next step that she's taking, etc. But I'm watching her presentation, I'm watching her go through it all, and and there was people sort of on that webinar that were interacting with her and asking questions. And I just found it super fascinating that a lot of the stuff she was talking about is stuff that I think for us that are all in these circles all the time, I think we get a lot of it. But there was some stuff in her delivery just because of her unique personality that even for me, I went, oh, that I didn't actually quite look at it completely from that angle. And so now that's triggered a thought. But I think the good thing about allies and not worrying so much about competition in a negative way is that Monica, just watching the way that she put it together, I mean, she's creating clients. She's creating people that would probably never pay for PR, never pay for help in the music space ever before. I would never see value in it. And now suddenly you're getting people that are being pitched the idea of paying to get better in the music space.
Exactly.
And so it's not a case of, taking clients away. It's actually creating them out of nothing. And that there might be one person that's part of what Monica's doing and comes from never investing in any of this to suddenly investing, goes through what Monica's doing, and then comes out the other side and then decides, in 12 months' time that they're going to utilize somebody else in the PR world because they've got a different type of thing that they need to pursue. And so suddenly then, through what Monica does and what she talks about and who she talks about, suddenly there's more options to consider, depending on what needs to be done down the track. So I always see that with bands. I talk with other bands, and, especially before the internet, it was so competitive and very cutthroat and very toxic, because you would only have X amount of opportunities to do anything. Everything cost money, and you'd be fighting for people's attention where the opportunities at least appeared to be few and far between. So there wasn't a lot of alliances created between bands unless you had a friendship or something like that. But what I sort of really drilled into a lot of friends of mine over the years is that even though you might be taking, or you feel that one of your peers is taking attention away from you, you're ultimately a completely different band and a completely different style of music. And you think from a music point of view, when you listen to music, how many different bands do you listen to each day or each week or each month? You listen to a lot, and your attention's quite wide as well. So there's enough to go around. And the more that we sort of lift everybody up, the more attention everybody gets, which then filters back into what you're doing. So it's a case of just going back to what we said before. It's what value can we give to each other, that we might be doing something on the surface that looks very similar, but ultimately we're all unique. We've all got a different point of difference. It's just something that just raises the tide for everybody.
I agree, but again, you got to be strategic, or like knowing who you're dealing with at the same time when you're lifting them up, because if you pick the wrong people, that can bite you in the ass too, right? So you got to be kind of careful about that. I mean, I'll admit, I've trusted people I shouldn't have trusted before, but generally I get a pretty good idea nowadays of who I want to work with, who I don't want to work with, who I think is dependable, who I don't think is dependable. And, you kind of get a sense after a while because, but to me, I think the main thing is that if you see another individual that is working really hard and they appear like their intention is to lift everyone up, like you said, rather than just their own self-serving ends, I want to deal with that person. Like, it's kind of like, to me, it's kind of like you can tell a person's intentions after, dealing with them for a little bit. Are they all out for themselves? Are they out to help more people? That type of thing. And I'm not saying like you got to be necessarily all altruistic all the time because, I care about myself, but you have to kind of like look at it from the viewpoint of, how can this work for as many people as possible versus just work it to my advantage? Not like I want to help Andy because Andy's going to get me business in the future. And, Lord will tell other people about me, la, 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 la type of a thing. That's not how you want to look at it. I want to look at it from like, how can I help you increase your podcast, increase your band, that type of thing. And as a result of that, I know at some point it will be paid forward, even if it's not from you, it's going to happen in some way because what you put out eventually is what you get. Right. So, that's the main thing. But if I'm pushing up, like, for example, someone that's not a very dependable person, and basically their whole intention is just to gather as much money for themselves or fame or whatever, that's going to bite me in the ass at some point too, right? So I want to be very careful about who I'm aligning with at the same time, right?
And I think there's a very smart way of even those people that may not have a long-term strategy or may not have the best intentions at hand. There's a way to even keep those people on side in a very sort of minimalistic way where you're not ruffling the feathers or anything of the such. You're still maintaining sort of a somewhat, as healthy of a connection and relationship as you possibly can with a person like that as well. And so it's
civil.
That's the word. That's exactly it.
Civil. But you don't want to, but I mean, the main thing is, be civil, obviously. But I mean, like, if you know the person that you're dealing with is undependable and that they're all out for themselves, just stay away as far as you possibly can. Don't invite help. Don't invite to help them. Don't, like, my whole thing is like, if I don't want to deal with someone, I generally won't, unless I absolutely have to. Like, if I have the person as a client, I've taken the money and I didn't realize that they were going to be this way, I will do my best to make sure the client's happy and I'll do everything I can. But in the future, I'm not going to work with them again. You know what I mean?
Well, it's also that association of with your own reputation as well. So the last thing that you want is that a perception's created that you're unaware of because of potentially making a poor decision in the short term with somebody that ultimately is not going to bring you any value, and that person's already creating their own reputation, and you sort of just out of being around them, suffers as well. So it's you have to have a degree of awareness when you're making those decisions to reach out to people and ultimately just be helpful.
And if you see a red flag, and everybody knows what a red flag is, almost always, like, if you see something that seems like a red flag, it probably is. So just be aware of that, because I've had too many times where, like, I'll have someone I know tell me that they, the person did something weird, or they said something weird or something, and they kind of knew already it was a red flag and the person potentially was no good, but they went anyways because they ignored their own gut instinct on it, right? So most of the time, most people can kind of get an idea when something is off about another person if you really pay attention. You know what I mean? So, but I mean, obviously there's people that, are very good at masking, the fact that they're not good people. But as a general rule, what I found is most people, at least there's indicators that show up that the person can't be trusted or whatever, right? Like, one thing I notice is that people who complain a lot, or they're really cheap and they always want a discount, or, they're trying to, lower you down to the absolute last penny type of a thing. Like, I had someone a couple weeks ago, they got in contact with me about PR, and I think it was a couple weeks ago, might have been last month, I don't remember, but anyways, and they said that they were having some difficulties financially. I was like, okay, fine, right? That happens sometimes to people. That doesn't necessarily mean anything bad. But this person was like, I gave them a counter offer, and I said, since you're having a problem, I'm willing to reduce it by this much, and I feel bad for you, blah blah blah, and I really respect that you let me know, blah blah blah. And they came back and kind of rudely, and they wanted lower. So right off the bat, I was like, you know what? No, I mean, like if they came back and they were honestly like, I really appreciate that, but unfortunately I can't even afford that or something like that, I might have been willing to like help them, but it was kind of like an attitude of like, I can't believe you're still charging me this much. You know what I mean? It was, the way it was framed was kind of like, you owe this to me. And I was like, no, I don't. So, and it's always the people that, that are like that always expect the moon. And, they're like, why aren't I on the cover of Rolling Stone? I paid you $25, and it's like, you only got me 50 reviews. And it's like, what the fuck are you talking about? I basically did everything for you for free as a favor. And now you're upset, So it's like those type of people, I mean, you just don't want to be around them. Sorry if I went off on a tangent there, Andy.
No, it's fine. And I think the big thing that a good message out of that is you have to be really careful to not get sucked into that as well, like a back and forth, because it's like people that deal with it might be in the complaints department for a business or something like that, like typical customer service. You're getting people that come in with a problem all the time. And some people you're just never going to satisfy. They're never going to be happy whatsoever. And some people that don't have the resilience themselves or even the awareness sometimes get sucked into it and take the behavior of others very personally. They think it's a personal attack. But the really important thing to remember is that if they're being an absolute tight ass with you and they're being inappropriate with the way that they're requesting things, asking for things, conversing with you, more than likely they're doing that with everybody they're interacting with. Right from every other person within a similar space to you, to friends and family, to the strangers on the street, everything. And so they're just a naturally unhappy person, or somebody that's not satisfied in anything that they're doing and lack the skills or the awareness or the care to be able to think of other people. And so I think when people sort of take the step back and go, this person is basically just existing in their own bubble. It's not actually, this is not about me. This is not about my business. This is not about anything this person is interacting with me about. This is about them. Then you sort of go, okay, cool. And that's when you can cut the ties a lot cleaner and quicker and sort of move on, then rather than sort of feeding the troll, so to speak. Because, I mean, I even had one the other day. I put it on Twitter just as a laugh. I kind of feel like this person was just trolling me anyway, but I sell some band CDs on eBay just to have another little opportunity for people to buy stuff. And somebody messaged me and asked for free shipping. And so I asked them, where are you located? And they said somewhere in the US. And the CD was like $20 Australian. And I laughed because I thought, man, it's going to cost me almost as much to send this CD over. Basically, I'm giving away the CD. So I just said, look, unfortunately, I can't do that, blah, blah, blah. This person, and then I also thought, well, this is an opportunity. This is a lead for me. So if this person is genuine, I'll try to capture this person, because you can't, in eBay, at least, you can't give links, you can't plug things. You got to try and be very calculated with the way that you drop information in there. So I just said, look, if you message us on our Facebook page, the band page, I'll have a chat to you and see if we can work out some things. I've got a bunch of offers on at the moment, and maybe I can work out some discounts, etc. And this person came back and responded and said, no worries, this is too expensive. And then straight away I thought, well, okay, that's fine. I'm like, well, why are you wasting my time? But then before, I was just going to leave it at that. I thought, well, that's fine. We'll go off on our separate ways. But then the person sent another message straight after. It was almost like they had another thought, and they just wrote, your loss. And I'm sitting there at home with my wife, and I'm across the table from we're having a coffee or something, and I tell her, and she goes, oh, well, I'll leave you to it, because she knows what I'm like. I'll run with this. And so I sent a message back, and I over-serviced this. I fed into this troll too much, but I just said, Well, the loss would have been me actually sending you the CD. And I feel like the only thing that I've lost at the moment is me spending time replying to your message. And then I've just said, I've given you heaps of options here. I'm trying to be helpful. Please don't try to be a dick about it. And then they just came back and said, well, you've actually, something really very juvenile or something like, see, I told you lost or something like that. And then wrote some weird sort of acronym or something like that, which I found out was some Indonesian slang for "you're lame" or something like that. And I left it at that. I didn't do anything more. And then I thought, who is this person? Are they just? Is it a bot? I've got no idea whatsoever. So anyway, at the silver lining of all this is I managed to turn that into a Twitter post and post it online as a bit of lighthearted humor, But you realise that people like that, if it's a legit person and they legitimately thought that they were trying to get a CD off me for dirt cheap, more than likely they've sent 20 of those messages on the same day to lots of different people, and they don't like being told no, and that's why they respond the way that they do. And they're hoping that maybe in the past what they've done is by putting up a fight and pushing buttons that maybe people in the past have sort of backed down or crumbled a little bit, and they've been able to get what they want. And so, they'll just spread them out and send as many of those messages out each day. And then, and that's the tone and that's their approach. And you just can't feed it. And I even felt like I fed it a little bit more than it should have, but you get that stuff quite often. And, for me, I don't lose sleep over that stuff anymore when I get people interacting really inappropriately, because you just know that that's just them. It's their bubble. It's their world. They're trying to get me into their bubble. And I don't need to. I'm quite happy and content doing what I'm doing.
The lesson here is stay away from other people's bubbles.
That's right. I like that. We should call that the episode title. Definitely.
I like it.
All right. Well, we'll wrap it up now, but another good chat. I tell you what, as I said before, I think what I'll be doing for the rest of the day today is I'm going to be annoying people on Twitter and responding to things.
I'll be trolling you in about 10 minutes. Don't worry.
Okay.
Probably 20 actually, but 10 to 20 minutes.
Sounds good. All right, man. Another good chat. We'll have to do it round 3 sometime soon. We'll lock something in and we'll just keep it rolling.
Cool.
Hey, now I highly, 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 highly recommend that you go and follow Curtis on the socials, on Facebook, Instagram, and especially Twitter. Twitter's a lot of fun, as you would have heard from the previous chats with Curtis. And of course, go to dewarpr.wordpress.com. You can just search for Curtis Dewar or Dewar PR on the socials. And of course, you can just get all the direct links in the show notes over at andysocial.net or andydowling.net or whatever you're listening to right now. You should be able to click on the links and get straight through to these pages. Massive thank you to Curtis, as you would have just heard, and in the previous episode with Curtis, just a wealth of knowledge, so many great ideas and insights, and just a top guy to be able to talk to. And I have no doubts that Curtis will be on the podcast sometime again in the future as well. So just a great guy to have on the podcast, and the cogs are always turning when we chat. So really, really cool. Now, moving along, as I mentioned at the beginning of the podcast, I'm on Patreon. If you want to support me and the podcast, you can get over there, patreon.com/Andy Dowling. Support starts from only $1 a month. It's dirt cheap. So just a little feel-good payment if you just want to throw a buck my way. And it all builds. It's a massive contribution to the podcast. There are costs associated with running a podcast, which I have no problems with paying. But when I get the support, it just takes some of that financial burden off, and just almost guarantees that this podcast just continues on for as long as I possibly can. I'd love to see this just go on for years and years and years and become an old, grey, grumpy old man still trying to talk to people and spit shit. I think that'd be amazing. So help me do that. And you can jump on Patreon. You can support with additional dollary dues, some higher tiers there where you get access to Patreon exclusive podcast episodes and other goodies there as well. So come on over and join. It's a great little community. It's a slow build. I'm really enjoying it though, and it's just a great way to keep inspired and motivated, and also have some accountability. Like, I've got people like financially investing in this podcast, supporting this podcast. And so now I've got a real commitment to up the ante and just continue to make this podcast bigger and better thanks to these legends. Speaking of legends, my social circle, which is my top tier, I've got a few shout outs to make. These guys are massive, massive contributors to the podcast, and just these guys are accelerating this podcast to really take it to the next level. So a massive thank you to Andrew from Perth, Mick G from Sydney, Ash from Deniliquin. Oh, I trip over that so much. Ash from Deniliquin, Dan from Tapto. We got Rod from Rayleigh in North Carolina. We've got Saul from Oxford in the UK, Patrick from Canberra, Liam from Brisbane, and Chris from Sydney. You legends. Thank you so much. Massive, massive help to me and the podcast, and just I'm loving the love that you guys are giving me. So it's just, yeah, thank you. Now, if Patreon's not your thing, there are plenty of other ways to support the podcast. The usual shit, ratings and reviews, etc., are massive, and just sharing the podcast around. A bit of social media love goes a long way. But the fact that you're listening to me waffle on, carry on, spit shit right now is incredible. So thank you very much. AndyDowling.net is a place to go. We have another great podcast episode coming next week. I don't even know who it is because I haven't got my notes in front of me, and that's how unorganized I am. But there is somebody fantastic next week, and I can't wait to share it with you. Until then, folks, take care and ta-ta.